Welcome back to Change Ed.
Changed.
There it is. I had to wait for it. It was coming. My name is Andrew Kuhn. I work for Montgomery County Intermediate Unit. And here with me always
Tony
is,
Marabito. Tony Marabito. I work for Carbon Lehigh Intermediate Unit.
and we are excited to be part of Change Ed. Changed.
Changed.
Uh, we have been talking about why science, why now. And this episode is actually dedicated to the old standards versus the new standards. When I think about this, no surprise to you, three different things come to mind for me. The first one is what's different. Next would be what does it mean for teachers? And lastly, probably more importantly, what does it mean for students? Tony, when you think about what is different, how can you summarize that for us, knowing that this is a under 15-minute podcast?
I can be short-winded here. First thing that comes to mind is breadth versus depth. I think we are going to take a deep dive into certain topics. I know the state has eliminated some topics to cover, so that allows us to dive in a little bit deeper, give kids experiences that they might not have necessarily had because there wasn't enough time. So eliminating some topics can really help. Built right into the standards, there are cross-curricular connections. So what standard is being covered through this tech and engineering that's also being covered in math or in ELA. So that piece of it, as well as career-ready skills. The standards are written very clearly, very nicely, with clarifying examples. I'll be the resource guy today. The Steels Hub on the SAS portal. Check that out if you haven't seen it yet. Very, very nicely done on PA's website there.
We just like to give a huge thank you to the Steels Hub for their endorsement of this show, even though they had no idea that was happening. So we're super proud to be partnering with them. Surprise. The thing I want to add to that is the style and intentionality of instruction. So standards before were set up in a way that it was about knowing certain things. And really, when you look at the toolkits that we have for education, there are like three things. It was knowing, connecting, and exploring. And we got to a point in education when standards came around, we're trying to figure out where do we land this? What do we do? If you've got these three different tools that you can use for education to get kids engaged and involved in learning, how do we streamline the process? So it ended up looking like, okay, we're going to get rid of exploring, right? We're going to save some time here. We're going to get rid of connecting, right? They should be able to connect on their own. Let's just focus on knowing. And that's what the old standards were about. We're just knowing. So now these standards have gone back to that. How do we take those three pillars and how do we embrace them and connect them together? And we're actually giving teachers more tools in their toolkit that they can use. And we're saying, yeah, it's important enough. Connecting and exploring are important. Take the time to do it. Don't skip over it to get to the next, to the next, to the next. Slow down, pause. And I think a lot of ways, what's so exciting about this is something that I think teachers have been asking for a long time, right? Once the students get around and they were set their way they were, they're like, my hands are tied, right? Like I want to do what you're talking about, but I can't. And now this is like that get out of jail free card, right? Not that students are jail. That's not what I mean. I'm trying to make a Monopoly analogy here, but that you can, go directly to Go, collect $200. Like you can do those things as you've always said that you wanted to be able to do. Now we can do that, and we have that opportunity. So with that, see my transition there. What does it mean really for you, for teachers? What do you think what are some of the big impacts that you see for teachers?
Well, I think first thing to keep in mind here is that we're not giving this to teachers and saying, okay, you're going to start teaching this tomorrow. This is something that started rolling out at the end of 2022. Tests and whatnot will change after 2025, but it's kind of like a little bit of a slow burn here, trying to get caught up with some of these other states. Another great resource, Open SciEd, trying to learn a little bit more about the units, or what experiences you can provide with students,
You
and
got
just
us
getting
two
resources to
sponsors
teachers.
for one
I
episode?
did.
Oh
I
my
did. Open
gosh.
SciEd. We just got off the phone right prior to this.
Folks, we're blowing up here. We went from one to two sponsors per episode.
Resource guy, that's my shtick. But I think we don't know what the testing is going to look like yet, but that's okay. It's going to change. We were told it's going to change. As soon as we have that information, trust me, that could be an episode, I'm sure, in and of itself. We'll get sponsored by the PSSA and Keystone group at that point.
Well, you know what, you mentioned something that's important. We don't know what it looks like, and that's okay, right? Part of science is not always having the answers. We're seeking answers. We're asking the question. So asking the question of like, what's the assessment going to look like? That's a really good question, right? Like, how are we going to be judged? At the same time, I have never met any teacher who said that they got into teaching because of their PBOS scores, right? Like, I want to crush it on PBOS, right? Like, that's never part of the conversation of why they did it. And I think one of the other important things to acknowledge is that there's never been a better time in history for a teacher to take a risk from the norm and try something new. I don't mean a risk like, yeah, I just won't teach, right? Like, I'm going to ride this one out. More like when we know better, we can do better, and we're learning and we are knowing better. So now there's a time to try and do better. But with the challenges that we have in education, which is kind of like one of those lower level challenges, right? Like, we need educators, and right now we're working through what that looks like and some shifts and some changes that we have, which can all be secular. But my point is like, give it that go, right? Like, if it's just not working, if it's not working for you, if it's not working for your students, to give it the go. And I think, this kind of, I'm going to piggyback from what I said in my part of my answer in the first question was that, again, this is a change in instructional practices and methodology, like how we're doing it. We're going to try something different, so that we can really engage our students differently, and so we can prepare them for the future. Like, we don't know what the future is going to hold, but we know that it's different than when we learned, right? When you used to walk to school uphill both ways in snow blizzards.
Horse and buggy. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes, that's where I was going with that. And I just graduated high school 2 or 3 years ago, but things even from then, things have changed, right? We can admit that COVID's changed things. Things are rapidly changing. Things are evolving. Even our AI systems that came out in November, there's a newer version, right? Like, so we know that this is something that we have to embrace. And so obviously that smoothly led me into the transition of what does it mean for students? And so I would love to get your take on what that means.
I think the largest impact for students will be their career readiness skills that actually are now built right into the standards. So for instance, I'm looking at a standard here and it has interpersonal skills, sharing thoughts, listening to ideas, creating arguments, right? So that's just a life skill. The fact that it's written into our standards now, and these students, when they're doing these investigations that we mentioned previously, they're going to have to be able to give their opinion in a polite way, right? I think COVID kind of hurt us in many ways, but socially, for sure. I mean, kids being at home and typing on a computer or looking at a video screen for hours upon hours just didn't help any of these soft skills that these students will need in whatever career path that they choose. So having that connection to PA career ready skills, I think, is a huge step for students, and I think it will really impact their future when we get there.
You bring up a good point that SEL is really laced with a lot of strong, let's start that over. STEELS is laced with a lot of strong SEL components. And I guess it could really go either way, right? SEL, STEELS is SEL. And so it's part of developing the person where they're at, right? Like, not kind of bringing in this big picture, national curriculum. And there are a lot of great companies that have embraced NGSS that can help prepare you. That's not what I'm saying, but instead, it's STEELS is about getting down to the local level and what is the impact for you and what does that look like for you, especially when we get into the environmental literacy and the sustainability and just all of it. It's about talking about issues that impact you and matter to you versus talking about something that might have happened on the other side of the state, or like in Carbon-Lehigh, right? Like, Carbon-Lehigh has a different impact for me as a learner than it made Montgomery County. But really, we learned that, through watersheds, we're all connected. So it actually does matter, right? It is impactful, but trying to bring the learning down to where it's a little bit more impactful. So Tony, you have any final thoughts that you want to throw at us, or maybe any other sponsors you want to drop on us when it comes to
I think sponsors are good for now. I think we stick to two max per episode. But I do want to bring up one other connection that I just made while you were talking there. You know, some students are so good at playing the game of school, you know, they just want that right answer right away. And I think this will allow teachers to make students think a little bit differently, allow them to ask questions that there might not be one right answer, or they might not all have to take the same path to get that correct answer. I think this will allow them to really dive in, and that's a skill they're going to need in whatever career that they might move on to. So that's one little tidbit I wanted to add there.
Yeah, that's a great point. This is a way to do school differently, right? And I think it actually within the systems that we already have, because there's a lot of things that are really well established that families count on, right? Like the schedule and knowing that, you know, busing is available and all those things that we do that come with education. But this is a way to work within the system and to also have a great impact and make changes. Well, I mean, you've convinced me, Tony, right? Like I was on the fence, but now I'm sold with everything, all the wisdom that you dropped. And I think a good spot to go from here, you know, we talked a couple of episodes about why science, why now, is to transition into phenomena. What does that look like when we talk about phenomena, and what is its role in science, in education, in learning? So come back, stay tuned. We will see you next Monday.